Level up your LA Kings experience with the new Vivid Seats Elite Seats. All the on-ice Kings action with even more exclusive access. Enjoy great seats to the game along with premier dining inside the Lexus Club with all-you-can-eat food and non-alcoholic beverages. Plus, get a free Team LA Kings item and parking with your purchase. Score your Vivid Seats Elite Seats tickets today and earn rewards on each purchase from the only ticket company that rewards you for buying. Experience it live with Vivid Seats, the official partner of the LA Kings.
You're listening to an LA Kings podcast. For more episodes of this and every other Kings program, visit lakings.com/podcast.
Gavrikov, high slot, shoots, scores! Well, there's one. Gavrikov just throws it.
You're listening to All the Kings Men, the official podcast of the LA Kings.
Chase down, in onside, Kempe, out up high, Gavrikov shoots, scores! Ringing it off the post. Gavrikov and the Kings have tied the game at 1.
Now, here's your host, Jesse Cohen.
Welcome back, Kings fans. I'm Jesse Cohen. This is All the Kings Men. It's time to crown a King of the Week. But before we do that, some notes I'd like to address. First of all, for those of you that like to listen to Kings Talk, the post-game radio show, it's available as a downloadable podcast the day after the game. But also just a reminder, because we've had some questions about it, we are no longer on the iHeart app. The game and Kings Talk can now be found on the ESPN LA app. Some of the games will be broadcast on 710 AM terrestrial radio, but every game will be available on the ESPN LA app, which you can find in the App Store or wherever you find apps. So if you're one of the folks looking for the game and or Kings Talk after the games, that's where you can find them. Also, lakings.com/podcast will have All the Kings Men, Kings Talk, The Rain Check, Channel 67, all of the podcasts available. Again, lakings.com/podcast. If you'd like to have a question addressed on Kings Talk or here on All the Kings Men, we now have a text and voicemail line that is always active, always available. You can leave a text or voicemail at 747-326-0093. That's 747-326-0093. Okay, let's get to the episode. Time to crown a King of the Week. Joining me this week to do so, John Hoven, a.k.a. the Mayor. What's going on, John?
Doing great, Jess. Happy to be back. Let's see what we can argue about today.
Before we do that, do you prefer John or the Mayor? I don't think I've ever asked you this question before.
People call me everything. John, Johnny, Mayor. I don't know.
All right.
Whatever works. It's been so long. I don't.
I might go back and forth, but I'm going to start with John.
Yeah, all right. That's fine.
Second question before we get into this. I brought this up with Hannah Davey. You and I have talked recently about how there are things that we know how we feel about it, but we also know that we don't care.
Yes.
This is one that I
have a skill for that stuff.
Yeah, this one I don't care, and I don't think I know how I feel about it.
Okay.
But there are people who care very deeply, and I try to be respectful of it because I don't care, and other people do care. I try to defer to them caring because I don't care. Okay. So it's perfectly easy to try and make people happy. Do you care about LA Kings versus Los Angeles Kings?
You know, that's a really interesting question because I used to not care.
Right.
However, because the organization cared so much about the branding of LA, I subconsciously began caring about it. And I noticed that when I edit or proof other people's articles at times, we have a couple different editors on mayorsmanor.com, but occasionally I'll jump in and edit. And when I do correct Los Angeles to LA. But I sometimes laugh to myself about it because I find myself doing it almost on autopilot just because it was such a big push by the organization. So it's a long-winded answer of saying I don't really think that I do care. I'm certainly not offended if people call the city Los Angeles, but I refer to them as the LA Kings, not the Los Angeles Kings.
The only reason I ask is that it is now, that push by the organization is now over.
Right.
And Trevor Raybone says Los Angeles Kings when he's announcing at the games, and I have begun trying to remind myself to call them the Los Angeles Kings more often because I know that people like it. And Like I said, I don't care, so I'm perfectly happy to try and do it. But I just never know who is really passionate about it or not.
I would say I'm not very passionate about it. On my list of things to care about, it would not rank in the top 10.
Right.
But I'm sure that I'm sure you and I will still find something else to disagree about.
I'm sure.
Pronunciation of a name or something.
Well, that's a whole other can of worms. So when I schedule people to come on here to do King of the Week with me, obviously we schedule it in advance, so there's no way of knowing if it's going to be a good week or a bad week. But I do try and look at the schedule and pick weeks where there are a lot more games when I have a guest that I want to let spread their wings on the topic. So I picked a week where there was 4 games for you. Because sometimes there's 2, sometimes there's 3, sometimes there's 4. So I picked a four gamer for you, and I had no idea, obviously, that it would go so well. There are some weeks where it's really, really difficult to pick a King of the Week.
Yes.
And sometimes we've had to dip into the AHL or the juniors, and just trying to find something. This week there's too many. I mean, there's so many choices. I have no idea what route you're going to go. I'm not even entirely sure how I'm going to go right now.
Okay.
Because there are a ton of options. So we'll just start with your honorable mention for the week. I should be clear. They beat Nashville, they beat Minnesota, they lost to Vancouver, and they beat Columbus.
Yeah. Overall, a pretty good week. And in general, the Kings are on a pretty good stretch right here over the last 6 or 8 games when you look at the wins and the points they've been piling up. But yeah, thank you for scheduling this week. I think you even picked it before the season started because I've had this date in my phone for quite some time now. So thank you for that. Anyway, for honorable mention, here we go. You talk about having too many people. I narrowed my honorable mention list down to 3 people, and I entered the recording today not knowing which way I was going to go with these 3. So I'll start with the person who probably finished third among that 3, and you might find this interesting, and it's Laffy, because he could easily be the King of the Week, but for me, he's in the honorable mention group, which I'll get to later when I do the runner-up and the winner. So you have Laffy, who just continues to score at a feverish pace. And what's most impressive is that he's doing it 5-on-5. So he's my 3rd star among honorable mentions. I had a 3-star ranking system. I created my own system for honorable mention. I know you love that kind of stuff. So Laffy comes in 3rd and the 3rd star. 2nd star almost became the 1st star of the honorable mentions, but it's Trevor Lewis. He hit a milestone with the 100th goal of his NHL career. And by the end of the week, he saw himself up on the top line as well with Kopitar and Kempe. It's not a move that I agree with, but I certainly see what Jim Hiller is trying to do because, and you and I have talked about this offline a few times over the last couple of weeks, he's a little bit boxed in on what he can do, right? If the 3rd line is set, and if you don't like Fiala on the top line and you only like him on the 2nd line with Deneau, you sort of have limited options there. So Andre Lee started the game, and then he was pushed down to the 4th line, and then Akil Thomas started. Akil Thomas started. I'm talking the last couple of games.
Sorry,
I'm sorry. I should have clarified there. And so then, the next game against Columbus, he puts Akil up there, and then he only lasts a period or so. So Trevor Lewis has been Trevor Lewis of old, the Swiss Army knife. He's been all over, right? He's been a center. He's been a winger. He's been 4th line. He's been 3rd line. He's been 1st line. So good on him with his milestone 100 and 101. And I also want to give him credit, Jesse, because he had an opportunity the game before 100.
I'm glad you brought it up. I was going to try and cram it in before you moved on to your 1st star.
He could have scored, and then he passed the puck. It really, veteran move there, knowing that he didn't want to go with an empty netter for his 100th, and he was rewarded the very next game with his 100th goal. So I thought that was kind of cool. But I have to give honorable mention to number 79, to Big Sammy Helenius, who's put the work in. And I know he only played in 1 of the 4 games, but, I'm the one picking. So he is my honorable mention. Awesome to see us making his debut. And, Jess, he didn't look out of place. He didn't look nervous. He was making plays. The magic sort of was rekindled with Andre Lee. And, man, I don't know how long it's going to last. I know it'll last at least 1 more game based upon when Turk is eligible to come off of IR. But I really like the play of Sammy Helenius, and I'm looking forward to seeing a little bit more on the road trip, and we'll see how long he's up. I mean, it could be 1 more game, or it could be a handful.
Well, I'm glad that you decided on Helenius, because generally speaking, I like to acknowledge anybody that plays their first NHL game in this thing. And I thought he'd get a goal. He got an assist, but happy for him to do so. And I had a conversation with somebody, a couple of people actually, before the game, and I just said, listen, let's just play hypotheticals. If he shows up and performs far better than expected, right? It's going to be tough because fourth line center, there's only so much you can do. But let's just say he shows up and really kills it. Does he ever go back down? And I mean,
here's what I would tell you, Jesse.
Yeah.
It's a great question, because there is a metric, I believe, at least, and I haven't asked Hiller about this yet, but there is a metric that to me would be worthy of him staying up. And that metric is faceoffs, because outside of Phil Deneau and Anze Kopitar, very few people, if any, on this team can win a faceoff on a consistent, I'll say nobody on this team can win a faceoff on a consistent basis. Now, the overall numbers, the team numbers have looked a little bit better over the last couple of weeks. But when you drill down and look at the individual players, many people that are taking those, tertiary faceoffs, if you will, are still below 50%. It's really Kopitar and Deneau carrying the mail. So if Sammy wanted to pick one metric outside of goals and assists, which are easy, man, if he could be on the right side of, the faceoff dot, the draws taken, they would certainly give him at least a conversation point in order to stay up. So, yeah, I guess we'll have to see. But who comes out of the lineup? At this point, to me, it would have to be Akil Thomas, because he just doesn't seem to be endearing himself, not yet at least, to Jim Hiller. So,
we've got Arthur Kaliev skating again in a red jersey. So, I mean, that's coming up too. So it's tough decisions.
Let me tell you, you'll see an article on mayorsmanor.com here in the next couple of days. So I know you love the plugs, but Kaliev's a month away from what I'm hearing. So that's not nothing's happening on the Kaliev front anytime soon, even though he's skating. So
no, but a month disappears faster than you think, right? Like before you know it.
Does, but I mean, it gives Hellenius some breathing room.
Sure. Well, yeah. But I mean, Tanner Jeannot will come back from. I mean, there's all sorts of moving pieces, right? Turcotte's coming back, Jeannot's coming back. Theoretically, Doughty's out there looming to return eventually. I want to touch on two names I'm hoping that won't pop up in your runner-up or King of the Week that also made my potential list of honorable mentions. By the way, thank you for mentioning Laferriere, because he's a perfect example of why this week is so hard. I forgot about him completely. What did he have? A goal, 3 assists, plus 4?
How do you forget about this guy?
Because so many people having great weeks. I mean... Listen, he had a goal, 3 assists, 4 points, a +1. He's and is absolutely my favorite current member of the organization. He's incredible. But the two names that I want to throw out there that I doubt will make your list. One is Mikey Anderson, 0 points, +6.
Yeah,
and got whacked in the head with a puck, and then came back the next game. Like
I was going to say, Jesse, if for no other reason,
yeah,
dude was laying motionless on the ice, full of blood,
leaking blood. Yeah.
24 hours later, the organization was like, yeah, he's going to be fine. He'll be playing tomorrow. What are you talking about?
Yeah. So that was impressive. The other name, Jordan Spence, 4 games, all 4 games, was on the ice for 0 goals against at any strength.
Really?
Yeah. And
that
was
I did not know.
One of only a few guys. I think he was the only guy that played all 4 games. Like there were guys like Alex Turcotte that played 8 minutes that, didn't have a goal scored against them. So that was a good week for him. And then another name, Byfield, scored 2 goals of the season. And his first goal was a nice one. His second goal was a nice one too, actually. So, but ultimately, because you picked Hellenius, I'm going to go ahead and take Laferriere because I think his week needs recognition. So, all right, those are the honorable mentions.
Wow, you're a pushover, Jess, because you had forgotten about him, and now he's your. I mean, that's some flip-flopping if I've ever seen it.
Well, I was going to go. I wanted, because there's so many people that I think deserve points in my very very scientific and correct point distribution system, that I wanted to make sure that we spread the points out as much as possible. So if you're taking Hellenius, I'll take Laferriere. Because I would have just taken Hellenius.
Okay. You would have.
Yeah, it's his first game. He got a point. I mean,
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
All right, good to hear.
And also, I really liked him in training camp. I was sort of surprised he didn't. This is no disrespect to Andre Lee. I just simply thought because he played center and because he's taller, because he's younger, because he has a higher draft profile, I would have anticipated Hellenius making the roster before Lee did.
But from a development standpoint, Lee entered camp about a year ahead of him, and I think
sure. And he's 3 years. I mean, I get it. I just thought Hellenius. I really liked his first game. All right, then this is where it starts getting difficult. Runner-up, your runner-up this week.
Yeah, and what's funny, Jesse, is I don't think it was difficult because my winner and runner-up came to me much quicker than my honorable mentions did. So for the runner-up, I'm going with David Riddick. And he might fly a little bit under the radar for a lot of people, but he had 2 starts. He won those games. He had like a 950 save percentage on the week. He only gave up 1 goal in the one start and 2 goals in the other start, if I remember correctly. I don't have my stats in front of me, but I'm pretty sure. I know you'll pull them up and correct me if I'm wrong. But David Riddick quietly got the job done this week. And I think that it was definitely deserving of being the runner-up, at least in terms of my standings for King of the Week.
Okay, that is a name that was not on my list at all. So this is why I have other people come on, because I would not have thought about that. Riddick is such a fascinating goalie to me because he doesn't look like. Now, listen, I've seen a lot of goalies in my lifetime, and I don't remember what all of them look like the way they played. But in my immediate memory, I can't think of a goalie that I can recall that played like David Riddick. And when he first got the call up last season, it was December, I think.
It was either December or January.
I think it was like late December. He played a game against San Jose.
Yeah, Copley's jersey, Copley's surgery, I don't think took place till January, but he was out starting in December.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that was the timeline.
And the first thing that popped out in my mind when Riddick started, and like I said, I think it was against San Jose last December, he played the puck more and he was more aggressive leaving the crease. And my immediate thought was, I wonder if that difference of style of play forces the team to be more aware of what's going on. Because you don't know what he's going to do. You can't take it for granted that he's going to play the way that Copley or Talbot did. I asked a couple players about it. They were like, I hadn't thought about it, but maybe. He continues to, he's not as aggressive as he was last year, but he's definitely does not play the position the same way that Darcy Kemper does. So that's interesting. I had Trevor.
Jesse, check those stats, because that's pretty impressive. 950 save percentage, and he only gave up 1 goal in the one game and 2 in the other game. And he picked up 2 wins. So, your backup goaltender, which, I mean, I guess that's a different argument for a different show. But in my mind, he's at least a 1B to, Kemper. When your backup goaltender comes in, you need him to play well. You need him to get wins more than anything else. That's the most important number for David Riddick, is getting wins. It really doesn't matter what his save percentage is. He needs to win games when he comes in, because they need those points, knowing that Kemper is going to be getting the quote-unquote tougher games, and you're not going to win as many of those tougher games. Riddick's number one job is to get points, and he did that this week. He picked up 4 points in the 2 games that he started.
And to your point, 2 games, 2 wins, 940 save percentage, 1.5 goals against. Darcy Kemper actually had better save percentage and goals against. Or no, he had a 1.53 goals against, but a better save percentage and had the shutout, but he lost to Vancouver, so I get it.
Who's your runner-up?
So my runner-up is Trevor Moore.
Trevor Moore?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. The last time I saw him, he was on the side of a milk carton.
Dude had a goal and 4 assists and was a +4.
He had 4 assists? When did those happen?
I don't know. I was looking and I was like, what? The guy had 5 points. Like, yeah. And really, I mean, that shorthanded goal. Did you expect that shorthanded goal?
Well, when Trevor Moore is out there, I think you should always expect a shorthanded goal.
I mean, that was a nice shot.
I wish people could see you rolling your eyes. No, I was not expecting a shorthanded
goal. Yeah, it was a really nice shot. And listen, 5 points is 5 points in a week where you go 3-1. And it was a shorthanded goal. It was a game-winning goal. It as you said about the milk carton, I have not spent a lot of time thinking about Trevor Moore this season. No disrespect to Trevor Moore. So for him to have 5 points, that's the kind of thing that we're going to need. I said on a recent episode of All the King's Men, and then somebody called in King's Talk to question me about it.
Oh, a double plug. Look at that, Jess. Yeah. That was
I
impressive.
said in the nicest way possible, I thought, Alex Laferriere can't be your leading scorer at the end of the year. And I didn't mean that he was incapable of doing it.
Wrong if he's the leading scorer. That's a real problem.
That's what I meant.
For a team spending the money that they're spending for a cap team.
Yeah.
You can love Laffy a lot, and I do. But wow, if he's the leading goal scorer, man.
Unless he has some sort of ridiculous season where he scores 45.
I was just going to say, unless 4 other players have 40 goals each,
right,
then it would be okay. But if the goals are distributed sort of in the typical Kings fashion, Yeah, it's an issue. But right now, hey, they're earning points. He's scoring 5-on-5. So good on Laffey. But back to Trevor Moore. I honestly had no idea he picked up 4 assists. That's
That's why I think
impressive.
it's important to recognize, because if the Kings are going to be competitive, they're going to need other players besides Alex Laferriere to start getting it going. So 5 points in 4 games for Trevor Moore.
Sure.
Getting it going. All right, your King of the Week then.
Clear cut, number 1 King of the Week, and I hope you agree with this, is Gavrikov.
That is the correct answer.
Yeah, he has just been phenomenal this week. And, the Kings are probably going to be the beneficiary of him being in a contract year. He's elevating his play. But what I really like about Gav is that Hiller is moving him all over, right? He's been on the left side on his normal second pair. He's been up on the top pair with Mikey Anderson playing on his offside, playing on the right side, filling in for Drew Doughty. And he's also dropped down and played on the third pair on other nights as well. So Gav's moving all around, which is interesting because sometimes when guys aren't, playing so well, you ask them about consistency in partners, consistency in minutes, etc. And here Vlad's just like, hey, move me around, put me in, coach, put me anywhere, and I'm going to come up and I'm going to perform. And that's like I said, the Kings can be the beneficiary of him going into a contract year. I think we can do a whole show on what happens next summer. Just like Matt Roy was a discussion all last year, Gavrikov may end up being a discussion all of this year, but we can save that. We're only 15 games into the season. Save it till at least January. For now, like the way he's playing. I like the versatility, and he seems to be having fun. And when he's having fun, a lot of other guys end up having fun as well. So Gavrikov is my King of the Week. He had a pair of goals and a couple of assists.
Yeah, 2 goals, 2 assists, +6. He's my King of the Week as well. That is the correct answer, like I said. And there every now and then there are little things that just make the game more fun. And his cell phone celebration, or I guess it's not necessarily a cell phone, his telephone celebration is goofy and fun. And then on the second goal he scored, I think it was, right, where we didn't know if somebody tipped it or if it went straight in, and then you get Kopitar making the hand signal to him to let him know that he scored it by Kopitar doing the phone sign, like just little fun stuff. It just makes the game more fun when stuff like that happens.
Now, you said that it's the correct answer, which means that you agree. So I'm curious, in your little point system, when the guest and you agree, is there like a bonus point awarded for? Because this week, King of the Week should not be the normal points. If both parties agree, that's worth an extra bonus point in my book.
That's interesting. I had not previously considered that. Ordinarily, just to let people know that the super scientific and correct point system is, both me and the guest agreeing on the King of the Week is worth 9 points in the total standings. And so far this year, we've done this 5 times. I have agreed with the guest 3 times because Dennis chose Jim Hiller.
I don't think you understand King of the Week. Okay, got it.
The King of the Week. So I gave his points to I think I gave his points to who I picked anyway. So I guess 4 out of 5. But last week Dan Greenspan picked Kopitar and I picked Laferriere.
What happens with the points then?
If somebody picks something like Jim Hiller or
last week when Dan and you disagreed, what happens with the King of the Week points?
Laferriere gets 6 and Kopitar gets 3.
Oh, they just get distributed. Okay, yeah. As 9 points.
Yeah.
I think if the host and the guest agree, I would suggest bonus points.
I'll have to think about that. It means going back and changing the numbers, but I'll have to think about it.
Well, you're only 5 weeks in, so for this year,
it wouldn't disrupt anything. But I'd have to go back and look at last year's numbers where Kempe put on a late push, and I don't know. I'll have to think about it. The Gavrikov thing, though, this is. We talked about earlier the Los Angeles Kings versus LA Kings, where I have an opinion, but I don't care about it. This is one where I don't have an opinion. I am curious and I care deeply. And the more that people tell me it doesn't matter, the more that I care and the more upset I get. And that is about which side of the ice different players play. Because Gavrikov, I find out Drew Doughty gets hurt. Gavrikov gets paired with Mikey Anderson. He's on the right side. And it's a very curious thing to me of like, why Gavrikov on the right side and not Mikey on the right side? Because 2 years ago when Drew Doughty got hurt, it was Bjornfoot on the left side and Mikey on the right side. So why now Gavrikov. And then I find out, well, when Gavrikov was playing juniors in Russia, he played the right side most of his young career. Then when he got to the NHL, they put him on the left side. And I thought, well, that's just dumb. Like if the guy is a right-handed or is a right side left shot defenseman, then, you know, shame on Columbus at some level and shame on us, I guess. I also noticed when Laferriere gets put on a line with Kopitar and Kempe, Laferriere switches to the left side. Mm-hmm. And now you have two wingers with Kopitar on their off wing.
Mm-hmm.
When Akil Thomas moves up with Kopitar and Kempe,
They
Kempe moves to the left side, and Akil Thomas plays on the right side. Akil Thomas and Alex Laferriere, I think, are the same age. Akil Thomas might be a year older, in fact. So I don't buy the, well, Akil Thomas can't play the left side, but Alex Laferriere can, if that were the reason, which, to be clear, it was not ever stated. And every time I've asked a member of the coaching staff, until last season, coaching staff, development staff, anybody, how do you decide who plays which side? The answer I always got back was, it doesn't really matter. Once the game starts, you know, it's more. What's more important is F1, F2, F3. And I realize I'm talking about defensemen here, so I'm sorry, I'll get back to it. But my response to that was always, if it didn't matter, it would be random. But it's very clearly not random. Like, there are very clear patterns that emerge. Kempe has been playing the right side for, 3 years now or something like that? Mm-hmm. And I didn't bother to check when Trevor Lewis was out there if he was on the right side or the left side, but I'm willing to bet he was on the left side. So the fact that Gavrikov can move back and forth from left to right on a team that has Clark and Spence right now, and Burrows, I suppose, on the right side. But as you mentioned, when Hiller moves the defense around, people are being asked to play wherever they're being asked to play. That just makes him more valuable, right? Like it makes him exponentially more valuable because you can play him on the top pair. And there have been nights where Mikey and Gavrikov have been incredible, right? We talked about Anderson being a +6 or whatever it was, and Gavrikov was a +6. Like that's great. And he's not playing a game that would make, like when Doughty comes back, Doughty's going back with Mikey Anderson. There's no, oh, well, Gavrikov and Mikey Anderson have been such a pleasant surprise that we're breaking up one of the best defensive pairs in the last 5 years. But yeah, he's proved himself to be incredibly valuable, especially over the last week.
I'll add to this with a couple of things. One being, from what I understand in talking to multiple people last season, Matt Roy, by contrast, did not show any interest at all in moving over and playing on the other side. So, yes, this is certainly making Vlad, more valuable because any player who can essentially be interchangeable in the top four is extremely valuable, right? If you're a third pair defenseman, it's marginally better because you're a third pair defenseman. But when you're a top four defenseman and you can play right or left side, it's exponentially sort of more valuable. So yeah, it absolutely is really interesting. And in this particular case, it makes him more valuable because they want to shelter some of the younger players with their minutes and not have Clark playing up there in place of Doughty, right? Letting him earn that over time. And Jordan Spence has had a taste that he's up there a little bit. He's up there here and there, but he's not up there full time playing with Mikey. There also is a size component with having Spence and Mikey together as a pair. And you normally would want a little bit more size or a little more. Size doesn't always necessarily mean height.
Heft.
That pairing feels a little bit light to me, if you will, where Gav adds a little bit of dimension to it. So anyway, it's going to be very interesting to see where this goes with Gavrikov, because, like I said, he's an unrestricted free agent next summer, and big picture, it's not where you would normally expect him to, spend a bulk of their money on a second pair defenseman, but to the point that you're making, he certainly has proven to be very valuable, and I think it's going to be a talking point in the second half of the season. I really do.
There are two players, and it's way too early for this conversation, but I'm going to introduce it anyway. There are two players that are currently really complicating the Kings' summer plans, and it's Vladislav Gavrikov and Alex Laferriere. I think everybody knows that Gavrikov is up for a new contract this summer. I don't think a lot of people realize that Alex Laferriere is. And if he does finish, like let's say he does lead the team in scoring, kid's going to get a raise.
Yeah, I'm less worried about Laffy though, only because Rob Blake's history with contracts on the younger player side. I'm not talking about free agents or that sort of thing, but guys coming off of their entry level contracts, he's done a phenomenal job. Could just go back and look at the history with those younger players and getting them on their second contracts, whether it's a bridge contract or even an extended contract, even like what happened with Mikey Anderson as well. So I'm less worried with Laffy versus where Gav at his age going into unrestricted free agency, what his agent might be looking for in terms of money and term, because that both would be important, not just money, but also the term as well. There was another point that I wanted to bring up earlier, and I'm sorry, I forgot to bring it up when talking about the handedness of the players. I just wanted to point out, Kaliev preferred to play on his offside when he was in junior, and that really hasn't been much of a talking point at the NHL level, but once he's able to come back in, back to our comments from earlier about trying to fit these pieces together, that might be something that Jim Hiller is going to have to, enter into the equation is not only where can Kaliev contribute the most to the team, but where can you place him where he might be set up for success. And maybe we're too many years removed from when that was, but it's always stuck in the back of my mind that he did prefer to play on his offside. And another thing that's funny about this is that Dustin Brown in his NHL career ended up enjoying it. So he started on, we'll call it the right side, his normal side, and he ended up moving. And I remember having a conversation with him about that and how much he enjoyed it and thought that it actually made him a better player. And he wished that he would have moved over to the left side earlier.
This is why it drives me crazy when people for years would, and this is why I care so much about it. People would say, it doesn't matter. And I'd go like, well, it doesn't matter, except that when you have a conversation with Alex Laferriere and Pierre-Luc Dubois last year about the fact that Alex Laferriere was constantly on his off wing. And when Dubois would move to wing, he would move to his off wing. And then Adrian Kempe clearly likes playing on the right side. Arthur Kaliev clearly likes playing on the right side. The team only has three right shot forwards available to them right now because of Akil Thomas. And at one point this season, I think we only had one in the lineup and he was playing his off wing. Right. And you're just like, what do you, and then you'll hear like, well, it's important to have a right shot forward on the power play, but the Kings don't really have a right shot forward that's obvious to be on the second unit. And even going into this season, there were questions that, when Alex Laferriere was named to the top power play unit, there were a lot of question marks. Now you go like, all right, well, he's almost at double-digit goals, so it makes sense. Although I think all of his goals have come at even strength. But anyway,
8 of 9 at even strength. So yes, It is funny that he's been getting power play time, but his goals are coming even strength. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah. So there's all crazy things. One last thing, actually, two last things, if you don't mind, I want to ask you about before we let you go.
Let's do it.
Ordinarily, we'd have Jack Jablonski come on and take a look at the week ahead, but Jack's in Canada attending the Hall of Fame ceremonies.
Oh,
so,
great. JR, quick, the first ballot Hall of Famer, Jesse. Absolutely.
If you say so.
100%. He's the second greatest American-born player of time. Come on now.
We're not doing that today.
500 goals, Jesse. It should be automatic entry into the Hall of Fame.
I have no problem with Jeremy Roenick being inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame.
Good, just leave it there. Let's go.
Yeah, all right. So coming up, Calgary, Colorado, Detroit. Anything stand out for you in those 3 games? 2 on the road, 1 at home.
Well, the 2 games on the road, the first thing I would say is they're not back-to-back. So I find that intriguing because if Hiller wanted to, he could go with the same goaltender in both games, right? You're not in a back-to-back normally, quote-unquote, would split your goaltender. So you don't have to do that here. That's of interest to me. The Calgary thing is interesting just because of the Johnny Gaudreau storyline. How ironic that they're playing Columbus and Calgary back-to-back. So that's interesting. More off the ice, obviously, than on the ice. The terrible tragedy from over the summer. Colorado is intriguing because they tend to run the score up on the Kings, it feels like, over the last couple of years, but their goaltending is so bad this year that the Kings, I think this is it's a game that they could conceivably win. I mean, you don't schedule it as a loss like maybe sometimes you normally would. They're really struggling. And Detroit, to me, is a winnable game. So this could be another strong week. Again, right from the off the hop today, we talked about the last 8 or 9 games. The last 2 weeks for the Kings have been it's been a pretty good run. I think that this week with these 3 games can be another good run And then the last thing I would say to tie it all together is Sammy Helenius, because he's only really guaranteed one more game, right? He's going to play in Calgary.
Not two more?
Well, it depends, because if Turk comes off of IR, he's eligible, right? So from a Jeannot perspective, right, Jeannot will be out for 2 more games. He would be penciled in to come back against Detroit. But if Turcotte was to come back or was to be, off of IR on Wednesday, what happens with Helenius? Does he stay up? So I'm very curious and intrigued to see how Helenius plays against Calgary and what that means. Obviously, if Turk is still on IR, the decision's a little bit easier. But if Turk comes off of IR, the benefit there is that I think he goes back to the top line left wing. And the one area where I think Hiller hasn't come up with the solution, I mean, I think he's done a fine job of mixing and matching on the defensive side. I think he's figured out sort of the goaltending rotation he wants to go with. He has a second and third line, but he just hasn't come up with an answer yet for who to play with Kopitar and Kempe. So if Turk comes back, to me, just by default, he goes back into that position and it further crowds the fourth line. Crowding the fourth line is not the end of the world to me because most of those players are going to get limited minutes. So I don't get, you talk about things that I have an opinion about, but I don't get too worked up about. I'm not really that worked up over whether Trevor Lewis is in the lineup or whether Akil Thomas is scratched. I mean, I have my opinion of who I would play for 3 guys on the fourth line, but the fourth line gets the least amount of minutes of any forwards. So focus more on the top 3 lines than on the fourth line would be my advice there. But I don't want to tell people how to feel or what to think.
I will. Stop worrying about the fourth line when the Kings still don't know who to play with Kopitar and Kempe. That's way more.
That's kind of what I'm saying, right? Yeah,
that's way more important than whether or not Trevor Lewis is in the lineup every night. And to be clear, I think Trevor Lewis has earned a spot in the lineup every night, but I'm aware.
I mean, he's having a fine season, Jesse. Look,
yeah, he's having a great season.
If Trevor Lewis is your number one complaint about the LA Kings, or the Los Angeles Kings,
yeah, there you go.
This is your complaint about the Los Angeles Kings this season, then things are going really, really well for Jim Hiller.
Now, you mentioned something, I don't even remember what it was, but it triggered a thought, so now I'm crowbarring yet another thing to ask you about. And this one I'm sure you will not care one whit about.
Okay.
We have this thing called the Molson Index, which we came up with a very long time ago, and it's anytime a former King scores on the Kings, it's a Molson Index goal. And in theory, I'm tracking how many times current Kings score on their former teams versus how many times former Kings are scoring on the Kings. Every year, I tell myself I'm going to track it, and every year, about 5 games in, I lose track and I stop paying attention.
Would that be a reverse Molson?
Yeah, sure. But this year, I don't know if it's happened before. I don't think it has. Provorov scored against the Kings. Now, he never played for the Kings.
Yeah.
But the Kings are paying a portion of his salary.
So are you asking me, is he a former King?
Is that a Molson Index goal?
No, absolutely not. No,
right,
that's a paper transaction.
All right. Fair enough. All right, final thought before I let you go. At the start of the season, Brandt Clarke and Joel Edmondson it was pretty clear that they were going to keep them as a pair. And before Drew Doughty got hurt, we didn't think that Brandt Clarke would probably get much power play time, and he was going to be a third pair, and it was going to be like, all right, let's see what happens with Brandt Clarke. Because of all that, and this is nothing to do with how good I think Brandt Clarke is. I just thought, okay, he's going to have a quiet season because he's not going to get much of a chance, and time on ice has a huge impact on points.
Sure.
As it turns out, 13 points in 16 games. And I was reminded of a quote that he gave. I've mentioned this before. I was reminded of a quote he gave in his draft year about going to play in Slovakia because of COVID. He was asked essentially, how did you adapt to playing with a bunch of adults in an adult league with a team that had played together, blah, 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 blah.
And he didn't adapt.
That's right. His answer was, I didn't adapt. They adapted to me. And some people felt that was arrogant. I did not. I felt that was just probably him being honest in the way that only he can be. Now that he's got 13 points in 16 games, that narrative, I heard Jim Fox say it on the broadcast the other night. There was a play, I don't remember when, but Brandt Clarke had jumped up into the rush. The Kings would have had a 4-on-2 it might have even been Helenius, but had whoever had the puck realized that Clarke was jumping into the play. How impressed have you been with Brant Clark, and how long is it going to take for the team to realize that this kid could be? I mean, he could have an extra 4 or 5 points at this point.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have been impressed because anytime that a player graduates to the next level and they can perform on the score sheet, especially, then you have to be impressed, because every time you step up, you are stepping up to a quicker, faster, better league, bigger, better opponents, etc. And so he has to be given credit for doing that. It was phenomenal when you saw him go. He put up big numbers in junior, and you're like, okay, kid, let me see what you can do in the AHL. Right. He did it, and he ends up being an all-star, and you're like, wow, that's pretty impressive, right? Then he jumps up, and now he's doing it at the NHL level, and so it is impressive. It doesn't mean he's perfect. There are growing pains. There are warts. There are times when I kind of wince a little bit when I see him do something, but it comes with the territory of a creative player like him, and it comes with the territory of a young player who's inexperienced in the league. So I don't overreact to the negative is what I'm saying. I do get excited, like you, I think, about the upside potential. The team does have to adapt more to him, and perhaps that's something that we're seeing some of the players doing. And I think what's interesting is by pairing him with Edmondson, just to pull on this thread a little bit further, Edmondson already has to adapt to him. So Edmondson, excuse me, it says his name wrong there. But Edmondson has to adapt to him because they've never played together. Where if you brought him in and you were like, look, you're going to play with Gavrikov then, right? Now he has to learn to kind of play with Gavrikov more than Gavrikov has to learn to play with him, because Gav is the established player on the team. Eddie's trying to figure out where to fit in on the team. And, he's going to learn, or he's most willing at this point to take on the role of a mentor for Brant Clark and really learn how to allow him to become the best player. Even the other night when he was physical, Clark, that is, in the Vancouver game, Eddie was like, well, look, he gets his wires crossed a little bit and we have to calm him down on the bench, and all that sort of stuff, which I thought was kind of a fun answer. But he really leaned into hey, man, we just have to let Clark be Clark. And that could be one of the reasons that's really allowing him to spread his wings, to use your phrase from the top of the call today. I will also point to, I know how much you love the Kings history. I'll also point to the 92-93 season when Gretzky was out and other players had to step up and become better, because instead of standing around and watching 99, they had to do their thing. Now, obviously, Luke had a great year. He had something like 28 goals in the power play or something. He had 68 goals or something ridiculous. It was
63.
Nuts, right? Yeah, it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
My point, though, is that when a great player is removed from a lineup sometimes, it forces other players to play bigger and to play better. And I'm not sure that Clark would be spreading his wings the way he has and putting up the points or being given that opportunity if Drew was here, not because of a time on ice, but mentally, Jesse, the confidence that he would be standing around watching Drew a little bit more, even subconsciously. He'd be watching Drew more than just playing his own game. So it really takes pressure, I think, off of Clark to have Doughty, not there on the bench and not barking, which it's all positive. That's a mentoring role. So I'm not dissing Drew. I'm just saying that I think that it does take a little pressure off of a young player like a Brant Clark and allows him to do his thing a little more freely.
That's interesting. At the beginning of every year, we do a top 10 questions facing the team for the upcoming year. And obviously the Drew Doughty injury was a part of it. But a conversation that I don't think we had that we may have to find a way to introduce was, what does Drew Doughty returning mean for Brant Clark? At the time, it was just, what does his absence mean for Brant Clark? Mm-hmm. But if Drew Doughty comes back, what does that mean for his confidence, for his time on ice, for, whatever it is? Because last season there were a lot of ifs, there were a lot of question marks, and I think most of them went the wrong way, and they still had a decent season. This season there are a lot of ifs and a lot of question marks, but a lot of them are going the right way, and Brant Clark is one of them. I mean,
yeah, for sure.
Kid's been a lot of fun. John Hoven, thank you very much for joining me. If people are not aware, which I think is probably impossible at this point, if you're listening to the show, you can find him on Kings of the Podcast or Mayor's Manor or on Twitter or all of the different various places that John Hoven shows up. John, I've known you a very long time. Always appreciate it when you come on.
Hey, Jess, thanks for having me. I'm going to crowbar one thing in.
Sure.
I'm going to add to your list of questions. You have 10 questions. Add this as question 11. when are the Kings going to add the crown to the pants? Because it's been rumored for quite some time now, and I've been waiting, and I'm expecting it to happen soon. So, that'll be a question. That'll be storyline to follow throughout the season.
Yeah, that is not the thing I care the least about, but it is the thing I care the second least about. But I will keep an eye open for the crown on the pants.
You got it, Jess. I'll talk to you soon, man.
Thanks, John. Have a good one.
Bye.